Hey, welcome to another episode of the Min Ed Soda podcast, where we talk school leadership and school in general here on our podcast. I am the Duffer Kip Link, and I'm joined by my colleague, the Dr. Todd Van Erp. Good afternoon, Todd.
Yeah, we are recording this on Wednesday,
Tuesday, Todd.
Tuesday. Holy buckets, I'm already ahead of myself. Tuesday, October 12th, and it feels like fall around here. When I took the dog out for a walk this morning, it was pretty brisk and there was a pretty good wind. And thank goodness I had my sweatshirt on. I had my hands stuffed in my pockets the whole walk and was questioning whether I should have worn my lined sweatpants or not. So we're getting to that point of the year, Kip, and what is it? Next week is Ed Minnesota break. So that's always kind of the sign in the education world that, yep, it's fall and it's here.
That it is. You can see a shift, and it's actually kind of gray out at my house today too. So hopefully we can have a little bit more of the warm weather, at least during the daytime, that we've been experiencing.
I'd be okay with that.
Well, Todd, I am super excited for today. We've teased this episode a few times already. This is a follow-up to when we had Gina Meinertz on from Spring Grove. And at that time, we referenced the math lab that they've got going on at their high school. And today we're joined by Chris Strinmoen, a good friend of mine. We worked together here in Dassel-Cokato about 20 years ago, and he's now returned home to Spring Grove. And he has one of the most unique situations I've seen in terms of how he's operating his math lab at Spring Grove High School. We're going to bring Chris on here. We'll let him tell you a little bit more about his class sizes and the size of Spring Grove, just kind of as a refresher from when we had Gina on, but how at Spring Grove in their math lab, they're meeting the unique needs of their learners through their math lb. So Chris, welcome.
And before Chris jumps in, I'm going to admit that I have been super pumped about this conversation with Chris, because I don't know about you, Kip, but I get a lot of questions from school leaders and teachers around, how can we move to more of a standards-based learning model or a proficiency-based model. So I have been waiting for this conversation with Chris. So welcome, Chris. I'm thrilled that you're here. And I just met you about 10 minutes ago. So I'm going to do a lot of listening and I'm going to shut my mouth. So give it to us, man.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. As Kip was referring to, a couple of years ago, we started a unique situation in Spring Grove. We created what we refer to as a math lab. And it was me and our middle school math teacher, together in the same room. And just to give you an idea, I guess, when I say me and our middle school math teacher, I am the high school math teacher, the only one for 9th through 12th grade. We're a very small school, rural school. Our class sizes, we have quite a range going right now. We have a low of maybe about 18 in a class to a couple grades right now that are pushing about 40. So typically,
and when he says class, he doesn't mean like class size. He's talking graduating class.
That is correct. Graduating class size. And typically it's been kind of the mid to upper 20s. So that's kind of, I guess, what we average. So K through 12, I don't know the number offhand, but I know we're 300 something total students. So anyway, I'm the high school math teacher. My colleague that teaches the 7th and 8th graders and dips down sometimes in the 6th grade. We were together in a large math room space that used to be the old high school office. And so you can imagine kind of a large area when you get all the offices and desks out of there. And so we were able to bring in both of what would typically be our classrooms into this one space. We had little breakout rooms off to the side. One was very unique. It had a glass garage door opening that we would use to get in and out of the room. And in there we could seat comfortably probably 12 to 15 students, although we could cram a little bit more if we really wanted to. And we used that room as kind of our, we call it the seminar room, I guess, where we could do some lectures with small groups. And we had the big, large open area for kind of a workspace for students to go out and do some work. And then we had another room off to the side that was more so for maybe 4 or 5 students at a time. And again, that room maybe more so for interventions. If we had a para working with us in the room, they could take a student or 2 over in there and kind of have a little quieter environment working with them. But anyway, the idea is we could bring in to this math lab really any grade level at the same time. In fact, we ran kind of a traditional math schedule. So I would have, let's just say, a sophomore class in there working on geometry, high school geometry. And my colleague would have her 7th graders doing a pre-algebra class. And we would have around a block schedule, so we could take that block of time and split up who would be in the seminar room giving their lecture at a certain time for students that needed a certain lesson. And the other one could be kind of roaming the large room where kids were working and kind of acting as a coach, helping them out wherever they needed it. So I could kind of float between grade levels and help 7th graders at the same time as my 10th graders. We were using at the time an online program called Alex to kind of drive our math curriculum, to get the practice and a lot of the teaching done through that Alex program, which would have video lessons for different concepts. And then you get some practice problems and kind of bounce back and forth like that till the end of a unit. Where they would kind of do an overall assessment, all done online. And we are, by the way, 1-to-1 devices in our school, and our 7 through 12 all has MacBook Airs. So that's kind of how the lab anyway would work and function logistically. And what we would do is one of the reasons for going down that path is I really, one of my goals is to try to get my classroom environment in a way where kids can work at their own pace, whether that be faster or slower. And this allowed kids through that system to kind of go at their own rates. I had some kids on the high end that would actually finish a grade level, at least the concepts and topics that we wanted them to cover. They'd finish a grade level before the end of the school year. They would have 3-4 extra months where they could actually start the next year's or next grade level's content. And we would have some on the other end too that just needed that extra time, and we allowed them to actually go into June and could come in an hour during the summer and finish up if they needed to. So I'm big on that, trying to have that flexibility, and that was one of the dreams heading into the math lab, was to give kids the opportunity to work at their own pace. That being said, with all those kids coming in to that environment, 2 different grade levels, some middle school, some high school, when COVID came around, we kind of put in some protocols at school here that we needed to try to keep grades separate as possible. So we went, if there would be a COVID case, we wouldn't spread it across grade levels. So in the meantime, right now, I have since moved out of the math lab back up to the high school wing, I guess you could call it. And I have my own room, and we've kind of steered away a little bit from the Alex program, because one of the things that we felt over the 2-3 years where we were doing this was it was maybe a little bit too much time on the computer, even though we were bringing kids into that seminar room for discussions and lecture. We just weren't getting enough interaction that we had hoped. So recently I've kind of gravitated more towards problem-based curriculum, where we're creating large-scale problems that kind of drive the curriculum, supplemented by an online program like IXL, where they can still practice kind of their basic skills. But now we can get a little bit more interaction with the kids and get them talking about a more larger scale problem and going down that path. I've lost a little bit of that self-paced aspect that I want to try to get back. So this is always kind of a work in progress, and who knows when COVID kind of lifts itself, if someday we'll kind of get back into that math lab environment again. But I think even if we do, it's probably going to look a little different from what we were doing before, where we had just kids on the online program and us as coaches. So
two things I want to expand on or have you expand on because I got to witness your math lab firsthand when I visited Spring Grove a couple years ago. Um, One is you talked about making adjustments to how we're delivering it. And when we had Gina on a couple months ago, she referenced how often you are surveying your students. And so I know you were doing that. So I'd love to hear more about how often you were surveying the students and the things that you were finding out from them and how that drove how you changed. And then the other piece is you kind of just made reference to like just being like a seventh grade pre-algebra and maybe a ninth grade geometry. But I also happen to know that you were really working hard with students that might have been in calculus and you couldn't offer it at the time that they would have free. And so that you were kind of essentially telling those students, go figure out the rest of your schedule, then come back to us and we'll figure out how we make math fit. So those two things, if you could touch on those a little bit more in depth than my just shallow dive into the pool there.
yeah, no, those are two great points. First of all, your first question, we're really big here in Spring Grove in asking our students, how is it going? Are we meeting your needs? How can we change? And so we try at least once per quarter, if not even more often, surveying our students and just kind of seeing how is it going. Are you liking how this feels? Do you enjoy math more than you liked it before? And so that's kind of what drives how we change our structure, our classroom environment. One of the things that came out of those surveys was kids, like I had predicted, loved the self-paced aspect. That's one of the things they really enjoyed. Someone that wanted to learn faster didn't have to sit there and listen to me, talk about something that they felt they already knew and understood and just wanted to get going. And also for the kid that sat there and didn't know what I was talking about and kind of started zoning out, we kind of got away from that, which was a positive. But then like we said, we saw that, maybe it was too much time on the computer at times and kids wanted a little bit more of that interaction. We tried to foster that a little bit with student coaches who, if a kid was working ahead or ahead of everyone else, they could take a break for a day and just kind of go around and be an extra teacher. Because I tell kids all the time, it's true with me, that if you can teach it to someone else, then you're going to learn it better yourself. And that to me is when you've shown mastery. So I would try to keep.
And sometimes students speak their own language.
Correct.
Right? Like when it comes from another 16-year-old, like they put it in terms that make sense to the other 16-year-old.
Yeah, I try to make sure the kids understand that I don't have to hold all the answers, and you don't have to do it my way and in my vocabulary necessarily. And so yeah, that's exactly right. Another student might have a better way of explaining it, and I try to keep an eye on that. And I know we want to talk standards-based grading later on, but if a kid is able to teach another, a peer how to do a concept, that's mastery learning to me. I think, and on a scale of 0 to 4, that would probably be a 4. So I tried to watch for that, as kids worked around with each other. And then, yeah, you talked about the schedule flexibility. That, it tends to be a nightmare in small schools, the schedule, trying to, work around your music, your band and choir, your lunches. And we're so small, so we can only offer a lot of times one section of a particular class. And so if that doesn't work in your schedule, you're kind of out of luck usually. With the math lab concept, with us going around as coaches and having multiple grades there already, oftentimes I'd tell my students, like you said, go figure out what your schedule is going to look like with all your other classes. And then if you've got an opening, whether it be first block, fourth block, third block, whenever, pencil in that you're going to come to the math lab and you're going to take your class at that time. So that helped very much with our upper level electives like college pre-calc and college algebra and college stats that I teach. where a kid wants to take all their other courses and couldn't fit it in. They could come in while I had my 10th graders in there and off in the corner, kind of work on their course. And I could buzz over there and check in with them. And I would make help videos for them if they needed some help videos and wanted to, learn on their own. A lot of those kids were high flyers anyway and didn't need a lot of help from me. So, but they just needed that time and that flexibility, and we were able to offer that to them.
Chris, I got a quick question around managing student progress. So as students are going at different paces, how does that work for the school then? You get to the end of the year, how does that work as far as students, what's the next math course that they take, or they just pick up where they left off? And then as far as reporting to parents, that's something parents are not used to that. They are, what did my student get in Mr. Strinmoen's class? And that they get an A, B, C, or whatever. And you're reporting to them probably using standards-based language. How did you navigate those things?
Yeah, and that's always a work in progress, I guess. I'm a big believer in standards-based grading over the years and standards-based learning. It can be complicated, especially when you're kind of locked into a grade reporting system at a school. So you're right. If someone was to log in and look at their grade report on my we use JMC grade system, they wouldn't see necessarily homework 1, homework 2, this page, these numbers, this test. They would see a list of standards that they need to cover. And so I could put in there, in a sense, all the standards that they were going to cover for the year, and kind of keep track of them accomplishing those and showing their understanding as the year went along. So some kids could have more in there than others, and we tried to kind of have almost like a moving target, I guess, of where we kind of wanted you to be for making progress, so that you didn't get too far behind. We certainly weren't worried about the ones that were working ahead. If they finished, I would keep track of their progress in the next course separately, kind of in my own spreadsheet almost. And then when next year rolled around, I would dump in all their progress at that time. I wouldn't necessarily have them starting 2 courses in the same year. So very rare we would have 2 kids be able to, or a kid be able to pull off 2 courses in 1 year, but at least they could get a head start on the next one. So that's kind of one way I could kind of get around that. But at parent-teacher conferences, we could have those discussions of, this is kind of where we wanted them to be at this time, and they're working a little bit behind. So on a grading scale, yeah, you probably would be behind a little bit, but we, before the end of the quarter, we would try to allow them that time to catch up and so forth. Even I have a hard time personally with quarter grades, because I feel like if the course doesn't end at the end of the quarter, if it's not done at the end of the quarter, why am I assigning kind of this grade that gets locked in? Quarter 1, I got a C. Well, what if by the end of the year, I've gotten all my standards up to proficient level? Shouldn't I have an A and that C be gone? To me, that's how it should look. And so I almost look at quarters or quarter grades as almost mid-term grades or partial grades, partway grades, I guess. And I know the report cards and things don't always work that way. So that's something, that's a bigger discussion level, I think, with administration, if that would be something we could change someday. Because I want to see an end of the course grade, and that's it.
I got to peek at his grade book when I was down there, and so he's able to, if we say that 9th grade geometry class, right? If you pull up Chris's grade book, you can see the 7 to 10 benchmarks that they have determined in Spring Grove are the most critical. So I don't know if you're calling them power standards or priority standards or essential course outcomes, whatever you're calling them there, Chris. But I remember looking and like you just having them all plotted out with a rubric next to it of like what is exceeding, what is meeting, what is in progress. And essentially that got to be changed whenever they met. So like for example of like maybe in this one benchmark early on they were in progress, and I don't know, I think you were calling them 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe,
Yep. Yep.
um but they could go back and fix that at any time like by demonstrating mastery. So it was more of a proficiency based grading scale that you get to keep working at. And so you know it was really critical that you had laid out all those essential course outcomes or whatever we're calling them in Spring Grove. And the other part that I loved hearing was um, like a kid could post the end of the course and then over the summer decide, "Wow, I can do better," and go back and fix any of the benchmarks that they weren't on before the next school year started. Um, did I accurately describe how you kind of have that laid out?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that we had cases where at the end of fourth quarter, when the course was done, maybe they were sitting at a B minus or B and had a few more, ICANN statements or benchmarks that they wanted to improve or hadn't gotten to yet. And so I begged administration. I said, if a kid is willing to work during the summer, can we not reward that? Can I go back and change that final fourth quarter grade if they show that they can do it now and put in the work and the time? And they said yes. So I thought that was a victory heading in the right direction. And it wasn't a hard fight either. Our administration is always on board with standards-based grading and these new ideas. So we had kids, I would go back in August and, after I'd kind of worked with them a little bit in the summer, we'd go back in the office and pull up their grades and change them, whatever their fourth quarter grade was. Now that doesn't maybe help you with honor roll for fourth quarter, because that's probably long gone. But again, what are we trying to do? We're trying to be a lifelong learner, and if you can learn beyond that last deadline, let's reward them for it, I guess. So.
Well, I appreciate you talking about this, Chris, because that is always one of the challenges, I think, when when educators are looking at standards-based learning, proficiency-based learning. How do you manage the bookkeeping, if you will, in managing, what if kids completed, what do they still need to do? So I appreciate you talking about that.
And like it was just this whole like acknowledgement that kids learn at different rates and in different ways, and we're giving them multiple opportunities. And I think the other question that kind of comes up sometimes in Chris is how did you convert those to because Spring Grove still
Yeah.
has traditional letter grades. So you have this 4, 3, 2, 1 and these number of standards. How are you converting that to an ABC, and can it always be changing?
Yeah, I mean, right now we do still have the traditional letter grades, which that could be a whole nother show of whether that's the best way to do things or not. But we try to group the substandards or ICANN statements that we're trying to accomplish as within a more of a power standard, I guess, that covers all of those. And so we kind of average out their scores on the 1 through 4s for that to kind of give us our power standard score. And then we look at the power standards and kind of do the same thing with those. Just because that right now is our best approach. If we have to get this thing down to one number or one letter grade, that's kind of what we're using. And so it almost looks like GPAs when they look at their end of the course grade. They'll see what looks like a GPA for my class. It'll be a 3.28 or whatever. And we have set up the criteria for a 3.25 and to a 4.0 is an A, and then we have our A minus and our B plus and our B. just so we can report a letter grade based on the standards-based work that they've done. Now, if you really wanted to get in there, and this has helped me tremendously for parent-teacher conferences, I don't have to sit there and talk about the A or the B or used to be well they scored a 48 out of 50 on this test and they're having a hard time getting their homework points. I don't have to have those discussions anymore. I can look and say, they really struggled here with adding fractions. They were great at converting improper fractions to mixed fractions, but they struggled with this concept. And I have more of those discussions where it's actually talking about what they're good at and what they need more help with, rather than just talking about a bunch of points on paper. So those discussions are a lot easier. And I think parents appreciate that. The report makes a lot more sense than, oh, they got 10 out of 20 on this test. What was that? What was wrong? What did they do not well in? So the reporting is much nicer and cleaner that way.
And if I'm a really driven student and I'm sitting at that A minus, that 3.19 is how it came out after we averaged all of my benchmark scores. And course is over, but god darn it, I really want an A. Can I do it?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll go back in and we'll sit down together and we'll look at, if you're sitting at an A minus, that must mean that you maybe lacked in one area. Or maybe you showed some proficiency, but you want to get it to mastery. We can sit down, do a reteach, and then we'll have you show me that you've mastered it, whether it's an assessment or I can interview you, have you do a little presentation in front of me if you don't want to sit down and do a paper pencil test. We don't make you redo the chapter 3 test or anything like that. We look at that one concept and you just have to show me in a way that is comfortable for you, that you understand it. So if you want to do it the test way, we can, or if you want to do it a different way, a project or an interview, you certainly can do it that way too.
Well, Todd, we only have Todd or Chris for a very limited time today. He's got to get to lunchroom duty, and we've got just a couple of minutes left before he's got to scoot on out. So any follow-up questions you have for Mr. Strinmoen here?
Oh gosh, I have a lot of questions, but I just wanted to say, like the last thing that you were just talking about, Chris, the ability for a student, if there's one part of a unit that they didn't do well in, that they can go back and focus on that and relearn that or learn it or whatever it is that they need to do to show that they have got it. That really connects well to what Kip and I are hearing with alternative leaders, in that instead of redoing a whole course, let's redo the part of the course that you didn't understand. So I appreciate hearing that. And I could listen for hours to you, Chris. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no, this is passionate things to talk about, and trying to do things maybe a little bit different way than what traditional school looks like, and in hopes that it's best for kids, and you want to be very transparent with what you want them to know and how you're going to assess that they know it, and you want to give them the chance to keep trying if they're willing to do that. I can lay out all these retakes and show me a different way possible, but again, it goes back to the student taking the initiative to want to do those things. And I, like I say, I tell them I'm always here. If you want to try to, show me you've relearned this and can do it better, let's do it. Come in and show me. And yeah, learning is never final. And like I said, that's what I've hated about traditional grading, is it always seemed like, okay, here's my grade, it's over, and now we're done, we're going to move on. Why not just come back to it and fix it and make it better? So it seems to be, it's scary, but a work in progress. A lot of good things come out of discussions like this.
Well, we don't have a tremendously large audience yet, Chris, but if even we just change one math room or one math classroom at some school over the next, course of a year, this conversation is totally worth it. If people want to get a hold of you, at Strinny on Twitter, right? STRINNY.
Yep.
At Strinny on Twitter. Or you can get a hold of Todd or I, and we'll get you Chris's email address. if you have follow-up questions for Chris. Closing thoughts, Todd, something that you're taking away from today's conversation?
I think just the whole concept of thinking differently about instruction, and I think of it more globally, not just math, but just instruction itself, where noticing that students don't all learn at the same pace, setting up a classroom or setting up a program that allows for that, and then providing student support so that they can make those gains at their own pace. I guess that's just reaffirm some of the things that I've been thinking about around education. So that's what I'm taking. How about you, Kip?
Well, I just the comment that Chris made a couple different times. Learning is never final. Just the fact that we're willing to meet you where you're at and how you're doing it. I mean, it just really holds the two beliefs that we hear teachers say all the time. We believe that all kids can and will learn, and we know that they learn at different rates and in different ways. Well, Chris is modeling that and honoring that belief. It's not, I'm trying to make it fit into a system. I'm making the system fit my beliefs, and just powerful and super and awesome.
Yeah, if I ever figure this out, I'll write the book. I'll go on tour. I'll probably quit teaching, and I'll help other teachers out. But I'm still trying to figure it out too. So
well, that would mean you'd have to leave Spring Grove. So
yeah,
I don't know.
That's true.
and I just followed you on Twitter, man. So
All right,
I got you now. So.
Well, that is going to wrap up this episode so Chris can get off to lunchroom duty. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at hashtag MinEdSota, MINN, capital ED SOTA. We are on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Apple, and YouTube. So check us out at MinEdSota podcast. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Kip.
Have a great day.